Alright, so Indiana Jones and the Great Circle just released. I'm playing the Xbox Game Pass version, and today we're testing it with the RTX 4090 that is paired with a 7800 X3D, and that again is paired with DDR5 6000 megatransfers per second CL30 memory. Currently we are actually on the Suprim preset or something like that. Let me just show you the settings here quickly. So 4K, and there's quite a few options here that you can choose from. I do have all these options enabled. I'll disable them when I actually play the game. But we have the Supreme preset enabled here, everything on its highest. Now this game does require ray tracing or a GPU capable of doing ray tracing, because it does use ray tracing all the time. And then we only have DLSS and TAA, so no FSR for some reason, which is kind of strange. I'm not sure if it's a limitation with the Xbox Game Pass version. Anyway, no frame generation, and as you can see, there's quite a few options for you to choose from. So just a disclaimer, I'm just testing the first area of the game, because I'll do a full benchmark run a little bit later. We don't have access to full path tracing just yet, which is kind of strange. Like, I think it's very, very silly. You pay extra to get early access to the game, and then you don't have access to the path tracing mode, which is only available once the game actually fully releases on the 9th, and it'll be pushed via a day one update. So you pay extra to actually play the game earlier, and then you don't get all the features. That doesn't make sense to me. And to me, it's a little bit concerning, because I have to pay early access to actually make videos of the games earlier. I don't get review copies or anything like that. So we'll be making another video on Monday when the path tracing mode actually releases. But as you can see, you're at 4K, everything maxed out, including ray tracing, everything. The game is running exceptionally well. We're getting 120 frames per second here at native on the Supreme preset. Let me just go through this specific spot here. I'm only testing in this specific area, as I said. I think it is a lot demanding, because I think it's very demanding, because there's a lot of foliage, there's a lot of shadows, a lot of lighting, and I actually think the game looks very, very good here. Right, so there's going to be a cutscene here. I'll just do this quickly. The frame rate does drop a little bit in the cutscenes for some reason, or that I saw earlier. I don't want to spoil anything here, but there's nothing much happening in this specific cutscene anyway. But you can see that the ID Tech engine, which is the same engine used for the Doom games, runs exceptionally well. Yeah, sure, it's a very customized version of the ID Tech engine, but I do think it is doing a great job. Yeah, so you can see it drops to around 100 frames per second during this cutscene. That's what I saw earlier as well. And then once the cutscene ends, we go back to 110, 120 frames per second, right? But just look at the frame time graph. Like, it is exceptionally smooth. There's one or two hitches here and there, very, very minimal, and I really don't even notice it. So this is even without any upscaling or frame generation. So I'm going to leave the Supreme preset. Let me just enable DLSS quality here quickly. Let's see what kind of boosts to the frame rate we can get here. Now I'm testing with native TAA and not DLAA. DLAA, there's really not that big a difference, around a 5% performance penalty from what I've seen between DLAA and TAA. Right, so DLSS quality still at 4K, and this is the ID Tech engine. You have to admire it. It is phenomenal. 170 frames per second. Yeah, sure, it's an RTX 4090, but once again, the game is fully maxed out at 4K. Well, now we're doing 1440p internal, but still, with all the ray traced options, there is some popping, right? The shadows, they don't load in, or the draw distance is not that great with shadows. There is definitely some popping, but you can just see that I think the game looks awesome. It runs very well. There's very little stuttering. Just look at the 0.1% lows there. 139 frames per second, and our average is 164. So very, very close together, and a very, very decent experience here. So I'm going to just enable frame generation here quickly as well. Let's see how high we can actually get our frame rate at 4K here. So DLSS quality, there we go. So DLSS quality with the frame generation enabled. Maybe we don't see that bigger boost here. All right, so frame generation boosted us around 30 frames per second at 4K. Now, this is kind of normal for frame generation, especially at these higher frame rates, and then also especially at 4K. I've noticed it before in some of my other videos, especially on the more mid-range GPUs. Frame generation at 4K really doesn't make that big a difference. There are games where it definitely does make a difference, and over here we saw around 20-30 frames per second difference, right? So not that much, and I don't think it's necessary at all unless you want to try and max out your 240 hertz panel at 4K. But this is a pretty good experience, yeah. All right, I think let's just try a different preset. I just want to get a baseline quickly again. I think we were sitting at around 140 frames, 120 frames per second, right? Actually, before we do that, I do lie. So let's go to 1440p because we don't have to restart the game for that, and then we will do the preset, because if we, as I said, if we change the presets here, it's asking it to restart the game. So 1440p, just making sure everything is fine. 1440p Suprim preset, and well, volumetrics quality is only low and medium. There's no ultra there. Native TAA, no frame generation, right? So let's see what okay. 180 frames per second. So I don't know, the spec sheet, I'll put up the spec sheet right now. You can see that I think they overspec'd a little bit, or they expected the game to be a lot heavier than it is. Maybe it becomes a lot more heavy later on in the game. I don't know. What I'll do is I'll play the game, and once the path tracing patch drops, I'll be a little bit further in the game, and I can actually tell you whether there are more demanding areas in the game. I mean, I'm testing this one small specific area. Performance will vary quite a bit depending on where we are, but I do think this might be quite demanding, right? So 1440p getting an average there of 180 frames per second, and our 0.1% delay is sitting at 143. That is exceptional. I think we are using around 10 gigabytes of VRAM with 12 gigabytes allocated, so perhaps on a 4070 or 4070 Super you won't be able to use the Suprim preset at native resolution, but I'll be testing with an RTX 2060 as well a little bit later. I just want to see what the minimum specs GPU would perform like. So with DLSS set to quality 210 frames per second here, like it really is great. You don't actually even need DLSS or frame generation if you do have a high-end PC. I actually think that if we have a 4070, like even a 4060 will be able to do 60 frames per second easily if it doesn't run out of VRAM, right? I've seen the spec sheet, and I do think 1440p requires 12 gigabytes of VRAM. And I've also seen some benchmarks from other independent testers where the 4060 Ti, even the 3080 10 gig, they actually do perform a lot worse than even a 7700 XT 12 gigabyte GPU. So I'm assuming they're running out of VRAM. Now, you can obviously lower the texture detail, drop the preset a little bit if you want to play at 1440p. So 1440p medium high should be fine, I think, because you can see our VRAM usage there in the top left-hand corner is setting at 10.5 gigabytes. All right, so that is with DLSS set to quality. I'm going to just enable frame generation here. I think we should see a little bit of a bigger boost to our frame rate with the frame generation enabled at 1440p. Or it could be that our frame times are so low, like 4 milliseconds. So how much did we gain there? Not entirely sure. But it seems like we did gain quite a bit. We're seeing frame times of 4 milliseconds, 2.8 milliseconds, 240 frames per second. This is insane. Sure, once again, as I said, this is a 4090. You'd expect it to perform well, but just based on the spec sheet, the game was touted to not run that well at all. So I'll be waiting for the 2060. It's a 2060 Super actually. I couldn't get a normal 2060, but I'll just have a look to see what the performance is like, because that is actually listed as the minimum GPU, because it is obviously the lowest spec RTX GPU that you can get. Not sure if there's an RTX 2050. Anyway, so it was the first one. Let's just say it's the first lower end or lowest end RTX capable GPU. All right, so 245 frames per second, GeForce 1440p on the Suprim preset, DLSS quality and frame generation enabled. The 1% lows and the 0.1% lows are like identical. This is a very, very smooth experience. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to native resolution here, and then go back to 4K, and we will, let me just make sure that there's no issues there. So TAA, no frame generation. And then if we go ahead and apply 4K again, and now we'll just change the preset. So let's just try, like, it's a very strange name, very ultra. Like, what does that even mean? A lot of settings are still on the highest, right? The only settings that did change was texture pool size. So should we, I think that's literally the only setting that changed. So should we, rather than just go down to ultra, once again, it's just the texture pool size that changes. Okay, this also now changes to ultra, but anisotropic filtering does not really impact performance on PC. So let's go to high, because then everything is set to high. I think it'll make sense, because we won't see a difference in performance just by lowering the texture pool size, because it does just say that it increases memory usage, right? So is this the only setting that requires us to restart the game? I think so. So what we can do is, let us set this to Suprim. Okay, so we selected the high preset and then Suprim for texture quality. That means we don't need to restart the game for the changes to apply. Is that true? Let me just do one test. I'll let you know whether it is true or not. Right, so I decided to restart the game anyway, because I didn't see any performance differences. So now where everything's set to high, and right, still native resolution 4K, and no real difference actually in the performance here. So it is kind of strange. It doesn't seem to scale very well when it comes to presets. Supreme or high preset performance looks identical. The frame time graph is exceptionally smooth. Once again, everything runs very well. So I don't think we'll be testing too much here. I think the real test will actually come when we do have access to path tracing. So not going to be testing DLSS and frame generation yet these settings, because there's no performance difference. I even set it to low, restarted, and the frame rate was sitting at around 125 versus 117. So very little difference to the frame rate or to the performance by using lower presets here. Maybe it'll make a bit of a difference on lower end GPUs, but over here it did not. All right, so I'm going to just see 1440p if there's maybe a difference there, although I doubt it, right? Just going to show you the performance here. This is more or less what we were seeing earlier as well, between 160 and 180 frames per second. So I don't think that on this particular system anyway, the presets make a difference. We are fully GPU bound. You can see that the GPU usage is sitting at 99%. GPU power is low-ish for a 4090. It's 350 watt, give or take, and CPU usage is it's okay, like 40%. Does mean that the CPU is getting used a little bit, but surprisingly our RAM usage is quite low, right? We are sitting at 10.5 gigabytes of normal system RAM used, and on the high preset here, VRAM usage is actually quite high still. We are sitting at 9 gigabytes of VRAM used, as opposed to 10 on the Suprim preset. So you might have to lower your settings a little bit more if you do have an 8 gigabyte GPU, and I think that's where the limitation comes. All right, so as I said, just a short video to show the performance. We will be doing a full benchmark video once path tracing actually releases, and by that time I should have the RTX 2060 Super as well, so then I'll add that into the mix. All right, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.